Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the Bandwagon Sports YouTube channel. I'm your host, Shoot the Rock, and as you can tell by the title of today's video, the initial college football playoff rankings have been released, and I'm going to be reacting to them, giving you guys some teams that I think maybe are ranked a little low that I could see jumping up, some teams I think are a little overranked, and then ending with kind of my picks, how I would have ranked them, and how I could see things going moving forward. So let's just get into it right away. Let's look at here what these rankings were to start. So, maybe by surprise to some people, my Ohio State Buckeyes are ranked number 1. Don't click off the video if you're an Ohio State hater. I'm actually going to be very complimentary of some other teams. Number 2, we have the defending back-to-back national champions Georgia. Number 3, that team up north, the Wolverines. Number 4, the Florida State Seminoles. 5, Washington. 6, Oregon. 7, Texas. Alabama is at 8. Oklahoma's at 9. Ole Miss at 10 to wrap the top 10. And then the last 3 here on the board, Penn State, Missouri, and Louisville. So, where I'm going to start today's video, I'm going to start with a team that I think got underranked. In my opinion, team that kind of, I think, got a little undersold for me would be the Washington Huskies. At 5th, I definitely would not have them being the undefeated conference champion that I would leave off the board, just because I like that win that they have at home against Oregon. Granted, that's a game that could have very easily gone either way, and the teams will have another rematch. So looking here, this is Washington's schedule. So the remainder of the year, probably their toughest test remaining. They got to go to USC this weekend, but then they also have to go to Oregon State in a couple weeks. Like I said, that marquee win was against Oregon a couple weeks ago at home. But then, they've had a couple tough tests. They didn't look too good against Arizona State. They had a tough game against Stanford before they pulled away. But I do think right now, I like, just because I would say that Oregon win is probably a top 3 win on the year across all of college football. I personally would have had the Huskies in my top 4. The team that I would have bumped them out, the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State, what this ranking is really telling me here with Florida State, I think they're going to have to finish the year going undefeated. I think they're the only ACC team that has a chance to make the college football playoff. So you guys saw Louisville was there at 13, the only other ranked ACC team in the bunch. But Louisville does have a loss to Pitt this year that I think will kind of disqualify them from making the playoff. So if we look here at the Florida State schedule remaining here, so they have a nice win there against LSU. Struggle a little bit with Clemson, who is falling off a cliff, sadly, if you're a Clemson fan. But then looking here, they do have to go to those Pitt Panthers, who I'm not impressed with at all this year. I think that should be a winnable game. And then they play Miami, who's a solid squad, but again, should be winnable. And then they do have to go to Gainesville. So I think it's very doable for Florida State to finish out the year undefeated, heading into the ACC championship game against Louisville, which I think they're going to have to win if they want to get in. I don't see an ACC team being a one-loss champion and getting in. I think it would have to be a undefeated season for them, which honestly there could be 4 undefeated teams here at the end of the year, but we'll have to see. A team here next, going to a team here that on the outside looking in that I think can make a run, Texas Longhorns. Steve Sarkisian said it himself, and I would have to tend to agree. I think Texas's win at Alabama is probably the best win any team has all year. And while that loss to Oklahoma stinks, I think a rematch in the Big 12 title game would be very much undo that loss to Oklahoma here as I'm pulling up their schedule. So as we look here, so you can see, yeah, like I said, only one loss of the year. That close game, a classic, a thriller there with Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry. The rest of the year, Texas, their only other ranked opponent they're playing here is Kansas State at 23 this weekend. The other games, while TCU and Iowa State are on the road, they are teams that are definitely inferior to Texas, even without Quinn Ewers. So I think it is definitely settling up well for a rematch with Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. And I just from what I've seen the past 2 weeks, Oklahoma, maybe watched them a little bit closer because I was placed some wagers on them. But I would have to say I think Texas is the better team. I think if they played that game again, Texas would win. That game was very close. Could have gone the other way. Either way, it looked like Texas had a win before Dillon Gabriel and Oklahoma took it from their grasps. Now, bouncing to that other team. Another team from the outside that I think there's a team that was going to get in that's on the outside. It would be those Alabama Crimson Tide. Like I said, their only loss this year so far is to Texas. And especially if, like I'm predicting, Texas can jump back up, I think that is then makes it kind of erases that, not erases that loss, but definitely makes it easier for Alabama to get in. Obviously, quarterback play has been the issue. It's been a little better lately from Jalen Milroe. Here is, again, I'm pulling up their schedule and just kind of looking at what they would have to go through the rest of the way. So, as you can see, that loss to Texas week 2. They didn't look great against USF week 3. But then a nice win against Tennessee, comeback win. Struggled a little bit with A&M, but won that game. I mean, they've already beat Ole Miss. So, I would have to say Ole Miss is probably out of the running just because Ole Miss would need Alabama to lose two conference games just because Alabama does one loss is out of conference. So Ole Miss would need Alabama to lose 2 games. And looking at this remaining schedule of Chattanooga, Kentucky, and Auburn, and LSU, I would highly say that it's probably unlikely Alabama loses 2 of those games. And as I'm saying here, I think they lose 0 and would be matched up against the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC title game, which I could see this year going in Alabama's favor. I mean, we'll have to see, but that's something I could see happening. So that's the team I'd keep my eye on. I, again, also would keep my eye on the final team here that I would keep my eye on, the Oregon Ducks. Oregon Ducks, a very nice win last week against the Utah Utes on the road. You know, not letting that Washington loss ruin their season. That could have very easily, tough game. Went down to the wire. They lost on a final kick. But it just didn't go their way. And this is another one again. They could be a rematch in the Pac-12 title game if both teams take care of business. Looking here now, I have Oregon's schedule pulled up. Remainder of the year, I mean, they do still have to play USC and they do have to play Oregon State, but both those games are at home. I think they're the better team, so I think the Ducks win both those games. And if Washington takes care of business, we have another great rivalry game rematch in the title game. So I've been talking a lot about these other teams. Some teams on the outside I think could get in. I haven't really touched on what the actual rankings are so far. So I'm going to go through here. There's 9 teams left that I think can realistically be in the playoff and win the national title. Maybe not win the national title, but be in the playoff. So I'm going to go through here, give them, if I was a committee, this is how I would rank them. So feel free to argue with me down in the comments. Let me know what your rankings would be. But I've talked about a good amount of these teams, so those teams I'll just kind of skip through, but the other ones I'll do a little more detail. So number 9 for me, I'd say Oklahoma. Like I said, past 2 weeks, not been impressed. Barely escaping UCF at home, and then obviously losing to Kansas. They got to get their act together a little bit. So Oklahoma's schedule here the rest of the way. Their only ranked game left here is Bedlam this week at Oklahoma State. I think they should win, but you never know. Rivalries throughout the records, that could be a loss. That could really throw a jumble in things. And with 2 losses for Oklahoma, would definitely eliminate them. No 2-loss teams ever made it. But I hope they win because I do want to see a rematch against Texas. Granted, Big 12 fans probably do not want to see the 2 teams leaving their conference playing in the title game. It's probably kind of like a couple years ago when Oklahoma had the chance to knock off Nebraska, and they did when Nebraska left for the Big 10. Big 12 fans probably want to see something like that happen to a Texas or an Oklahoma. But personally, I don't think that will happen. Going on next, then, that Alabama team I talked about, I would put them at 8 just because they lost to the team I had ahead of them at 7, Texas Longhorns. Number 6, so going here on the graphic, these would be the 6 teams in. Number 6, I currently would have Oregon. I could very easily switch Texas, Oregon. I think, like I said, similar situations. They have a loss they need to re-rep. Number 5, Florida State, like I said before. I would have number 4, Washington in before them. Kind of what I expected. I don't blame the committee for putting them at 1, but what I kind of more expected was Ohio State to be at 3. I mean, it really doesn't matter. I think the Big Ten title will be decided in Ann Arbor this year, that final week of the season. Why I will say I don't mind the Buckeyes being at 1 for non-biased reasons. I do think the Buckeyes have a probably the second best win behind that Texas win at Oklahoma, was their come-from-behind resilient win against Notre Dame. I also liked how they looked against Penn State. While the offense wasn't great, they do have Maserati Marv, shout out Gus Johnson. I mean, those are 2 big wins. Those are 2 good wins. I mean, Notre Dame is not a top 10 team, but to go on the road to South Bend is not an easy thing to do, and then obviously knocking off Nittany Lions at home. That game was really never in doubt in the second half. And I mean, the rest of the way, pretty easy schedule. I guess really the only other road test remaining is at Rutgers this week. Go Rutgers! For all those of you who love to bet Rutgers money line. But yeah, that's I personally do not have a problem with the Buckeyes being number one. I think they have two of the better wins on the year and have a more, probably maybe not as dominant, but definitely better wins than the two teams I have above them, which I kind of expected. If I were to go, I'd go number 2, defending national champions, Georgia. I would put them at number 2. Like I said, they have had a couple games where they've struggled. Carson Beck is by no means Stetson Bennett, which, I mean, makes sense. Stetson Bennett was in college for 7 years, so that will happen. And then, yeah, I would have had that team up north, the Wolverines. Obviously, a lot going on behind the scenes with them. I probably would have thought they were number 1 just because they've dominated all their opponents this year. I do have to give them credit. You know, J.J. McCarthy's playing well enough that he's got himself in a Heisman race. I do think Michigan, if I were the committee, I was a sole member of the committee and I was unbiased, which I'm trying to be here. I hope those of you who haven't clicked off the video are realizing that. I would probably have the Wolverines at number 1. Let me just pull up their schedule here. It's loading. There we go. All right, so as you can see, versus Purdue, that should be an easy win. They do have to go to Penn State, so that could potentially throw a wrinkle in things, but I think that Ohio State loss kind of knocks the Nittany Lions out of contention. Yeah, I'd say, I got them pulled up here. Ole Miss and Penn State are my two teams that kind of like, they're in it, but not really. Like I said, they'd kind of need a couple things to go their way, like winning out of Michigan. And then Michigan to beat Ohio State for Penn State, I believe, to have a chance at a tiebreaker. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what those are right in front of me. But yeah, like I said, I think that final game of the season in Ann Arbor, once again, will determine the Big Ten for at least the 3rd straight year. I mean, it's probably been longer than that, but at least it's been 3 straight years now where those are 2 of the top teams in the country. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please make sure to like, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to have more videos coming out like this. I'm going to hopefully do this every week, kind of react to the rankings. Like I said, this week, maybe a little bit longer, a little bit more spiels from me, whereas in the following weeks, you know, I'm going to just kind of be going game to game, like looking at what the team did the previous week as opposed to talking about the full body of work. Make sure to drop down in the comments how you would have the teams ranked, if there's anything you would disagree with me with, and make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. We got college football. We're going to have all sorts of videos coming soon. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.